back to Inside City Hall. We're returning now to tonight's top story, that troubling incident at a Brooklyn social services office caught on video. There's a little section of it where NYPD officers tried to arrest a woman and in the process rip her baby from her arms. There have been 24 hours of outrage and calls for action from New York politicians and even international attention. 2 peace officers from the Human Resources Administration have been placed on modified duty, and an investigation is underway by multiple agencies. Here now to talk about how the mayor has handled this issue and much more, we've got the 4 members of our Monday Consultants Corner. Tonight we have Republicans Letitia Romaro and J.C. Polanco. Across the table, Democrats Monica Klein and Evan Stavisky. Thank you all for being here. There's no Republican or Democratic way to cause a scandal and completely screw up one's administration. I think they tried to do that today, in part because of the handling of it. This happened on Friday, was publicized yesterday. As of midday today, the mayor, even at an open press availability, had nothing to say about it. This is not something you would, and meanwhile, it's showing up on the BBC, it's being played on national television, on MSNBC, not at all what you would advise a client to do.
No, I think it's terrible. First thing is we want to make sure that child is okay. Second, I find out that the mom is in Rikers. I mean, the woman
for the whole weekend.
That woman does not belong in a jail, not in Rikers. And I think that this is an opportunity where adults show up and they take control of what's happening and control the message. Why did this happen? Make sure it doesn't happen again. Make sure we teach our cops about de-escalation, and make sure that Pat Lynch, who's an important figure in New York City, understands that sometimes, just sometimes, you can't just automatically defend. Just wait and listen and see how we can de-escalate what could be a national embarrassment for New York City.
Yeah, but it's not just the police officers here. I mean, HRA called the police, and if you read the accounts, the security guards, the employees were taunting this woman. I'm sorry, I think it's just another example of how this administration, talks about, being progressive, but progress isn't supposed to leave people behind. He is always, the poor of New York are not being treated properly by this administration. And I think that, whatever transpired there, it started with the conflict between the mother and the HRA administrators there. And I think that he should be speaking to that.
It's a bit of a generalization to say the poor of New York are not being treated well by this mayor. We had Giuliani and Bloomberg who did a lot less than this mayor has. Obviously, the video is incredibly disturbing. I used to work in City Hall. I worked with PD. I understand that what the mayor was likely trying to do is get all of the facts before he responded. But he has responded. He said it was incredibly disturbing. And, obviously, when you have a 24-hour news cycle like this, you do need to respond incredibly quickly because the video is going all around the world. And you really need to make sure that the people of New York feel like someone is responding, that they're not just getting silence from City Hall. So that's obviously a concern.
I just think it's ironic that today the Civilian Complaint Review Board celebrated its 25th anniversary. And there were people 25 years ago who legitimately questioned whether or not there should be a mechanism to be able to hold the police accountable. And, Speaker Johnson was 100% right today when he said this was not just a police department failure. This was an HRA failure. This is, something that no New Yorker should feel good about and every New Yorker should be outraged about. And it's ironic that it's coming to a head today when the mayor is honoring the CCRB on its anniversary.
You got to ask why does it take hours upon hours? And I don't know, who out there has ever been to a food stamp office, but my son was on Social Security disability, and I could tell you he was in a wheelchair, couldn't speak, and he was treated so poorly, by the administrators within these offices. And you go to any food stamp office, welfare office, and NYCHA, you're going to see the same thing. And so while I appreciate that you say it's a generalization, I think the living conditions in NYCHA, what's going on here, people are not being treated well. And this woman was upset that she had to wait for such a long time. And those employees, HRA employees, escalated the situation until they called the cops. And so the aggravation was way beyond before the cops.
We have to be very careful here. This is a major issue. There's a lot of things going on here. This can easily become a campaign against the NYPD when it shouldn't. This should become a discussion as to what do you do with people who are in this position, and tell politicians across the city, this is how you should handle it. You don't put a woman in jail. You don't rip her baby from her arms. You don't do these things. These things you should be trained not to do this. And the NYPD should also be aware that everyone is a journalist today with their phones.
Yeah,
this is harsh. This is the reality. This is not the first time this has happened. This is the first time that we're seeing it. And people in California are watching this. and people in England are watching. So everyone here is a journalist, and everyone here could get one of these Pulitzer prizes for the kind of journalism that we're seeing from someone's cell phone.
It is very interesting that the missing ingredient here was somebody to step in and say the machinery is grinding somebody up here. Right. The machine is not working the way it's supposed to. You got to have cops who have guns and tasers and the ability to use whatever level of force is necessary. You got to have HRA in a crowded office. Somebody's got to, maybe have to sit on the floor. You have to sort of work this out. But then somebody has to come in and say, wait a minute, we're not here to brutalize people or throw people in jail and separate them from their kids. And, at some point, it may have to be the mayor personally, but we'll see how he works that out. One thing the mayor is doing, I heard NYCHA mentioned, he's gone down to Washington to meet with the Secretary of HUD. He is apparently was on the phone today talking with NYCHA. There's going to be a decision in fairly short order where both a federal judge and HUD itself are going to make a decision about whether or not to put NYCHA in receivership. There's some politics behind it, but the real bottom line is the conditions in public housing have brought us to this point. What ought the mayor to do?
Well, he claimed it was said that $13 billion is needed for to improve public housing. And the interesting thing is that since he's been mayor, the city budget has gone up $20 billion with no money for NYCHA.
That's absolutely incorrect. The mayor has put $3.7 billion into NYCHA compared to the past.
But there's $20 billion.
Your point is if he allocated the entire increase.
If he had allocated the increase properly to NYCHA instead of to some of the pet projects that he allocated it to, we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in now.
This is, there's a lot of blame to go around at what happened in HRA. There's a lot of blame to go around at what happened in what's transpired in NYCHA. Neither one's acceptable for any New Yorker. But that being said, NYCHA's been systematically defunded for years.
You can't, but you got to stop doing that. Every time that this guy has a problem, you always want to bring that Bloomberg and Giuliani get thrown into this debate.
I didn't say Bloomberg and Giuliani.
No, but I know I have a feeling where you're going with this years and years and years.
God forbid we look at the past 40 years and say we're not in the past 40 years.
That's supposed to be helping people.
NYCHA developments were built by the city, they were built by the state, they were built by the federal government. And yes, this mayor has put in several $1 billion, and that's not enough to tackle all of the challenges of NYCHA. But that doesn't mean that we should forget about the fact that the state and the federal governments have systematically underfunded NYCHA for generations.
None of that.
Hang on a second, Jesse, just saying that doesn't assign blame. It doesn't divert blame. But unless we recognize how we got to this point, we can't actually solve it.
I mean, think about the governor learned about the word NYCHA this year because there was an election coming up.
We're going to take a break here. We've got more to talk about. We'll be back with these consultants. We may or may not continue to talk about NYCHA, but we'll see after the break. Stay with us. Back to Inside City Hall. I'm joined once again by the four members of our Consultants Corner who solved the whole NYCHA issue over the commercial break, I might add. Let us switch topics and talk a little bit about Jerry Nadler. There's all this talk about when the House Democrats come in. It was a very particular meeting for New York because Jerry Nadler is going to be the chair of the Judiciary Committee. He made some comments over the weekend saying, maybe impeachment isn't quite necessary, but he also says, as far as he's concerned, a president can be indicted while they're still there. He says there's no constitutional bar on it, and he sounded a little interested in maybe testing that proposition. What should he be thinking about as he gets into the spotlight in a way that has never happened before? The national spotlight, Jerry Nadler.
Well, Congressman Nadler's an incredibly smart person who no doubt has already thought through a bunch of these things. He was very measured in the way that he spoke about it's possible that events that warrant impeachment have been committed, but that doesn't mean that they have to vote for impeachment. And there's a nuance there that gets lost in the national dialogue that I think is actually really important. And I'll just diverge for a quick second. Beyond Jerry Nadler, there's 3 or 4 other full committee chairs coming out of the New York delegation. It's a great time for New York.
Well, I think Jerry Nadler is brilliant, not because he's a fellow Fordham lawyer, no, but I think he knows that in order to keep the majority in 2020, you need red state Democrats. And if you come after President Trump now talking about impeachment without having an investigation fully done, you're going to hurt those red state Democrats from coming back in the majority. He knows to ease off, and he's talking about indictment because, as you know, this is a Department of Justice regulation that you can't indict a sitting president. This is not in the Constitution, and it's never been tested. We shall see, and that's what he's saying there. So I think he's being measured. I agree with you, Em.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I think that, using that word is a buzzword, and it's a lot of people in a lot of big cities around America love hearing that stuff. But I think that, it backfires. And I think we've seen, impeachments backfire on Democrats. And I think also, if you're going to push for an indictment of a sitting president, you get outside of the big cities. You go to places like South Carolina and Florida and Georgia, and they're not all in with, the big city folk who want to see Trump gone. So I think he needs to be careful.
Disruptive, to be sure.
Yeah, I
But
don't know.
the Democratic base kind of says...
Yeah, I feel like the Democrats are constantly too cautious, constantly worried about what the red states are going to do. I think if the Republicans were in the position we were in, they would be going full force, and that's really what motivates their base. Whereas the Democrats, during now, they were sitting around saying, I don't know, what should we do? Being so cautious. I really don't think that's the answer, and that's not what's going to motivate people in the next election.
We did do that, and we lost the House.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a price to pay, and you can't keep the majority without red state Democrats. You can't keep them without
could
Conor
motivate
Lance.
other people
If you
that
come
aren't
after Conor
inspired
Lance
to
district,
vote.
you're going to lose the majority. You got to keep them.
Well, look, in our last couple of minutes, speaking of throwing caution to the winds, there's 23 candidates for public advocate now?
But
24?
one that's going to win.
Only one that's going to win, which is your candidate, who is...
Melissa
My candidate.
No candidate. Who's your candidate?
Tony Herbert.
Tony
My
Herbert. You got a candidate? Are you a candidate?
No, I don't have a candidate. And as I told you in between breaks, I'm as popular as the flu with the GOP base.
We love you, JC.
It's 2018. We have women in Congress. We have women going to the state legislature. And right now in New York City, we have 3 white men in every single position of leadership. We have Scott Stringer. We have Corey Johnson. We have Bill de Blasio. We have no woman and no woman of color in office.
It's not about gender. It's about who could get the job done.
She is the one. She has Baker's clothes.
How about some neutral advice? With dozens of candidates running, what should... Well, first of all, actually, you could add some information here. I didn't realize the petitioning requirements were going to be so steep.
They're tough.
70... What is it?
So it's the petition rules and the financial requirements that are going to really separate the top tier from the bottom tier. 7,500 valid signatures basically collected within a maximum of 2 weeks, really 10 days. In the snow. It is absolutely going to separate the top tier from the bottom tier.
Wow, 7,500, right? That's when we'll find out who's real and who's not, right?
It's really what it works out to be is 15,000 signatures in 10 days.
Yeah.
That's tough. You have to have your act together.
My prediction is that it will be the elected officials with experience who drop out first, because that is a lot of work.
I agree.
Thank you all so much for your insights. That's going to do it for tonight's show. Thank you at home for watching. We'll see you next time inside City Hall.
Need a